We have like 1 more minute, or 30 seconds.
Okay.
Right here, it's the rectangle one right there. Lights are out.
Gotcha.
What's that?
Okay.
I now call the Snoqualmie City Council meeting to order. All please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Councilmember Shepherd, can you please lead us?
I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This time I'll ask the city clerk to please take the roll call.
Councilmember Jeans. Here. Councilmember Ross.
Here.
Councilmember Holloway.
Here.
Councilmember Mayhew is not here. Councilmember Lassay.
Here.
Councilmember Sundwall.
Here.
Councilmember Shepherd.
Here.
Mayor Larson.
I am here. May I have a motion to excuse Councilmember Mayhew from tonight's meeting?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to excuse Councilmember Mayhew. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. May I have a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the agenda as presented. Any discussion? Councilmember Shepherd.
I would like to take the warrants off of the consent agenda.
Okay. We'll move the warrants down to F&A. Councilmember Jeans?
I'd like to add the subject of town hall meetings to the agenda and the committee of the whole.
Okay. Is there any objection for the rest of the council in adding that?
Objection.
All right, and we'll add that issue. Also want to note that for efficiency's sake, we have, it's a public hearing, so it belongs at the beginning of the meeting. Or before I continue, be it noted that Councilmember Mayhew is now entering the chambers at about 7:02.
All rise.
Yeah.
Oh, no, that's something different, sorry. Different chamber.
So as a change on the agenda, I'm going to recommend that we pull under Committee of the Whole Agenda Bill 19032 to immediately follow the deliberations regarding the persona nutrition at the hearing. So it just would make a little more sense than pulling that apart. Anything else? Any other discussion? Okay, with those changes as noted, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. With that, we will move on to
This is your question.
on to the land use interpretation appeal hearing regarding persona nutrition. And I'll turn it over to the city attorney to kind of cue things up properly.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, council.
Well, actually, Bob, before I kick it over to you, it's a good segue to now focus on Bob Sturbank. A big hearty welcome back to Bob. It's great to see you back looking 100% and healthy and relaxed. Maybe too relaxed. We'll fix that quickly, but great to have you back. So
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Glad to be back. As with other matters, this particular matter in front of council is a quasi-judicial land use matter. That's because it involves an appeal by a specific party involving a land use determination. And the council, unlike most matters that it considers where it acts in a legislative capacity, for this matter it will be acting more like a judge deciding the appeal. And Washington courts have labeled that as quasi-judicial, and therefore it's subject to a number of limitations, including most pertinently the appearance of fairness doctrine. And in general, that doctrine is codified in a statute, RCW Chapter 4236, which prohibits ex parte communications between decision makers and proponents or opponents of an appeal. If conversations occur between a proponent or opponent, and the council members must place the substance of the communication on the record, and a public announcement must be made, and of the parties' rights to rebut the substance of the communications at a hearing where an action is considered or taken on the subject to which the communications related. So, for example, if a council member has run into a constituent at the grocery store and the person begins to advocate a position about, say, the persona appeal, that would be an example of an ex parte communication. Or if the person has emailed the council or a council member about the appeal, that would also be an ex parte conversation. There are a number of other related topics that are covered by that, and so to that end, I'm going to poll the council members individually with a series of questions that get at the disclosures that are required for a quasi-judicial matter. So, and I will recite, as I have with past quasi-judicial matters, recite the question and then poll council members individually. And then any disclosures that result will allow the parties, if there are any here, an opportunity to rebut and or object to council member participation based on any disclosures that might be made. So the first question is, do you have any interest in any of the property that is the subject of the persona appeal proceeding? For example, do you own any interest in the property that persona proposes to utilize, which I think is known informally as the former IGA building, or any membership or shares in appellant persona's business, or any interest, like a contract to purchase, any interest in that business or the property on which it's proposed to be located? Councilmember Jeans?
None?
Councilmember Ross?
No.
Councilmember Holloway?
None.
Councilmember Mayhew?
None.
Councilmember Lessay?
None.
Councilmember Sundwall?
No.
Councilmember Shepherd?
No.
Second question, do you stand to gain or lose by virtue of your decision on the appeal? For example, if you own property that is located within such proximity of the former IGA property that you believe its value would be materially increased or decreased by virtue of your decision? Councilmember Jeans?
No.
Councilmember Ross?
No.
Councilmember Holloway?
No.
Councilmember Mayhew?
No.
Councilmember Lessay?
No.
Councilmember Sundwall?
No.
Councilmember Shepherd?
No.
Question, are you employed by or have any prospective employment with the appellant in this proceeding? Councilmember Jeans?
No.
Councilmember Ross?
No.
Councilmember Holloway?
No.
Councilmember Mayhew?
No.
Councilmember Lessay?
No.
Councilmember Sundwall?
No.
Councilmember Shepherd?
No.
Do you have any relationships that you believe might materially affect your ability to impartially decide? For example, do you have any family, social, or associational relationships with either the appellant or its attorney, if they are here, or persons or organizations supporting or opposed to them? Councilmember Jeans?
Yes.
Could you please explain?
My daughter-in-law is employed by the persona.
Okay, do you believe that would have any effect on your decision this evening?
We've had no discussions about it. It would not affect me.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Ross?
No.
Councilmember Holloway?
No.
Councilmember Mayhew?
No.
Councilmember Lessay?
No.
Councilmember Sundwall?
No.
Councilmember Shepherd?
I did talk to one resident that was very concerned about the company being over her business, and so we did have an email exchange. I don't feel that it would be impacting my decision today, but that did happen. Yeah.
And have those emails been shared with the city clerk or others at the city?
I don't know.
Okay. And you were getting to my last question, which was about communications, but just backing up a moment, do you have any relationships, for example, of the type that Councilmember Jeans described, with anyone related to persona or
No.
or opposed to it? Okay, thank you. So,
Sir, just clarify, could you repeat the question that you just asked each of us?
the question was whether you have any relationships that materially affect your ability to impartially decide the appeal, such as a family, social, member of a social organization, association, church, that type of thing, with either the appellant or people supporting or opposed to it.
Thank you.
Okay. The last question, which Councilmember Shepherd just answered for me, so I guess I can now go in reverse order, is whether you've had any oral or written ex parte communications with the appellant or any opponents or proponents of the appeal. And if so, please disclose the communications and summarize their substance. So I'll go back the other way. Councilmember Sundwall.
On Monday, November 19th, 2018, I believe all of us, I certainly did receive a letter from a David Kao, K-A-O. I don't recall what his position is with the company, but he did send a letter indicating support for the appeal. I, at the point when I read that, didn't know anything was happening with it, so I just read it like I read all the emails that people send me. And I replied with, "Thank you for your email, David. I will review it and let you know if I have any questions." I do not recall if this letter became part of the record or not, but that I will disclose that I do not. That was 5 months ago. I do not believe that would have any impact because, to be honest, I can't even remember what the letter said.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Lessay.
I don't remember if I got the same email or not, so, but no, there have been no other instances.
Councilmember Hugh.
Well, the answer to the specific question you asked is no, but I just want to mention that I've had discussions and email correspondence with a business person in Snoqualmie who was raising a concern about the appellant's current business location. And there was an exchange about whether or not, about concerns that this person had with their current business location, but at no time in that discussion did this matter of this alternate location come up or get discussed.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Holloway.
Except for the aforementioned email, no.
Councilmember Ross.
You know, I think they sent us a letter, I mean, physically a letter. On the exterior, it said persona or something. So all of our mail was laying out here, so I grabbed mine and everyone else's and gave it to Jody. We
Okay,
did not
thank you.
open it up.
Councilmember Jeans.
Same response. I remember getting the letter. I don't remember what it said. Didn't affect me.
Right, but is anyone from Persona here this evening? Representing Persona? No? Going once? So the communications have been disclosed per the statute, and if someone were here, I would ask if they wanted an opportunity to rebut any of the substance of the communications as they've been summarized. They're not here, so have provided that, and that concludes my presentation on the appearance and fairness issue, and I would turn it back, I think, to Mr. Hoffman to make an opening.
Yeah, so with that, I'll ask
summary of the matter.
our Community Development Director, Mark Hoffman, to summarize the application and the reasoning for his rejection of the application as not an allowable use.
Mark Hoffman, Community Development, City of Snoqualmie. The materials are available in your packet in the overhead. They represent an October submittal to the Community Development Department for a land use determination. Exhibit A is the key, and that's the floor plan or blocking plan that the determination was made. The director's letter referred to on the screen is the determination. They had 14 days to appeal. In November 2018, they did, for the reasons stated in that notice of appeal. Staff has also included the Chapter 12 sections, allowed uses and not allowed uses, for your review to see how it was applied and how it is specifically worded for that location. Given those dates, we have extended this appeal hearing at their request 4 times. And on March 25th, we further notified them that April 8th, 7 p.m. was the appeal hearing. They confirmed that they received that email, and we haven't heard any response since then, one way or another. We had assumed they would be here tonight. Given that, the basis of the determination is Chapter 12 allowed uses, specifically 12C.010A. Allowed uses shall be retail business and non-retail business as defined. And I can bring up the exact language if you need further discussion later. 12C.010E is also uses not allowed anywhere in the neighborhood center retail, which includes warehousing and distribution. The fine detail of this is that they were calling warehousing and distribution fulfillment more in line with a more modern land use or retail e-tail. But the determination was made on the plain English meaning. We found that over 50% of the proportion was dedicated to fulfillment and warehouse. Therefore, it could not be an allowed use in the NCR. I did want to.
By fulfillment, Mark, you mean like mail order, not street retail?
They had about 30% proportion of their floor plan that was retail, and then also corporate office, which is allowed. Allowed uses are retail and non-retail commercial business, such as offices, similar to their current location on the other side of Center Street. What's missing from their current location is warehouse distribution. That's over in Sherwood's storage, hence the need for more floor area. The difference between the IGA shell and their current location is about 50% of their new floor plan, which totals about 18,000 square foot in total, is warehouse and distribution. So the plain interpretation of the mixed-use final plan is that that's not an allowed use, for the reasons explained in the director's letter. Persana's proposed retail sales and retail services are simply too small of a percentage of the overall proposed use by a significant margin to be considered allowable. Primary retail business and or non-retail commercial business uses are permitted in that space as they are in their current location above the restaurant on Center. The original IGA space was approved as a large structural shell for a major retail anchor that would support the overall retail center and provide direct retail sales and retail services to the community. And with that in mind, the interpretation was that this land use, even though we would like to retain this business very much in the community, is not allowed essentially in the neighborhood center retail. But we gave 3 to 4 examples of how it is allowed in the existing business park and why. Our hope is, they're not here to answer this tonight, but our hope is that they have taken advantage of at least one of those and can stay within our community. But the desire to keep them within the community and not relocate is simply not enough to overlook the allowable uses or not allowable uses in the mixed-use final plan.
All right, thank you, Mark. With that, council will open it to discussion and deliberations prior to a decision. Councilman Lissay.
Mark, I've just got a few questions for you. I want to just make sure I understand the definitions and how things are. Is there a, I'll just go through all of these just because it'll be easier and it'll be done. How is primary, in your letter you identified several code sections and how you used the term primarily characterized. Is there a definition in the code that defines primarily characterized?
No, there's not. And so we didn't have to find that threshold because their proportion was so significantly over it. When over 50% of it is a not allowable use, we didn't have to define primary as 70 or 80 or 90. At some point in the future, we may, but as part of this actual application and review, we didn't have to. So but it's clear that 50% is not ancillary to a permitted use. So
from a primarily characterized definition, it would be greater than 50%, or would it be higher than that?
In my opinion, ancillary would be somewhere around 20 to 30% at most.
Well, ancillary is something different. I'm talking about is the main use, it says primarily characterized by the sale of goods, merchandise, or services. So at what point does it become, does that threshold become primarily characterized by that?
60, 70, 80% primary allowable uses, allowable retail and non-commercial.
And so then, so you mentioned the second part, which was the ancillary. At one point, I mean, so if it's ancillary, it can't be obviously greater than your primary use. I think that's a common understanding. But if the warehouse area was accessible to customers, would then it be considered primarily characterized?
It's a hypothetical. In this particular case, they called it fulfillment. It has no characteristics of retail, so the scenario as presented, there was no need to investigate that.
As presented in their application, the general public for the sale of retail goods did not access the warehouse or the fulfillment area?
No, and nor the corporate office portion. So when we determined 30-something% was portrayed as an allowable use, that was being generous. The actual retail portion was significantly smaller than that, just essentially right along the front.
Do you remember the percentage of what that might have been?
Yeah, I have it in the staff report, which is the first attachment.
Would that be the 17%?
Yes.
Okay, that's my questions. Thank you.
So,
Councilman Ross?
so do you know what the business model is of this? I mean, can you go off the come in and buy vitamins or whatever off the shelf, or do you have to go through a nutritionist, or is it subscription only, or can you actually just buy vitamin C and go? So
It's both. The original discussions that I had with Magellan Architects and Jason Brown at Persona were along the lines of how the code, as written, tries to anticipate future uses and be accepting of changing patterns and names and definitions. That said, we have to go by that. The mixed-use final plan is pretty specific, allowed, and so forth uses. In that discussion, he characterized it as there's a retail footprint if you want to park and walk in and meet with a nutritionist and design a vitamin program for you. The primary purpose of the business is e-tailing online, hence the fulfillment and distribution in addition to the warehouse in the back. So there is product there. There is fulfillment, which is essentially fulfilling orders, processing, deliveries, and so forth. Corporate office with a small kitchen, and then a very small retail presence where, for the lack of knowledge, I don't even know if a nutritionist would be there or it's by appointment, but that opportunity was discussed with Jason Brown there. It was just simply too small of a footprint for that. So the majority of the business and the need for the greater space is the success online. So hence the warehouse determination.
it really isn't a retail sale then, because you can't go in and buy something off the shelf.
In theory, you could, but it's a small portion. He didn't make any statement along the lines of he would prohibit somebody from picking up something there, meeting with a nutritionist, paying for things, getting back into the car with vitamins in their bag. I simply don't know the exact detail of, other than the floor plan that's in the determination.
Councilor Sunmo.
Mark, this is the fourth time this event has been scheduled. Do you have any understanding as to why the what are they called? Appellant has skipped out on 3 and now 4?
I cannot speak as to why they're not here tonight. I do not know. I wish they were. And I will also say that we continue to work with their broker and David Cow's broker to fill the IGA space and the opportunities across in the business park. In November, when they filed their appeal, the council was in the middle of budget and reserved the first opportunity was in December. There was no way that we could prepare this appeal hearing, add it to the December 13th budget. We aimed for January. And I believe a couple days, if not the day of, in January, legal representative Glenn Amster contacted the city and said that the owner would like to continue it to investigate opportunities that if they proved fruitful, he could withdraw his appeal. He wouldn't need this space or this determination. Given the workload, we took it at face value. He's a local business. He's a local resident. We continued it. In the second and third extensions by staff, we made it clear that we needed to bring this appeal hearing to City Council. When I prepared the materials for the third hearing, I had talked to Glenn Amster. He was going to be back from vacation on March 25th. Both parties acknowledged that was an acceptable date as part of the granting of the extension. And the extension was granted under 2 conditions or understanding. One, either the appeal would be withdrawn or you would be at the March 25th date. And as you know, that didn't come about. They asked for another extension. Staff did not grant that. In discussions with the mayor, and given that we would like to take every opportunity to have the appellant actually physically present for a hearing of this matter, we extended it a 4th time, but we're very clear as to April 8th is your date. Now, to go a little further in their absence, I would speculate his perception may be that he would like to continue it as he investigates other opportunities, but hold this as a possibility. From my perspective, this never was a possibility, so at this point, I do not see a connection.
Chair, I'd like, point of clarification and request that we not speculate on the actions of the applicant except what is presented.
Yeah, points,
And
yeah.
point of clarification, I believe the applicant
The point
skipped out.
the point is sustained, yeah.
Second one, I don't believe the applicant, while I emotionally agree with you, the facts are the applicant didn't skip out, but through actions or words asked for an extension and was granted extensions up until tonight.
That's correct.
Yeah, so Mark, if you could refrain from speculation on their motives, it's not relevant, but.
You've answered my question. Thank you.
Councilmember Shepherd.
So if the applicant, since he can't seem to be, they can't make it tonight, if they really wanted to, can they come back at a future date, reapply and go through this process in the future?
I've read nothing in the code that limits the number of times.
I think that's a question for the city attorney.
It would depend on whether they were going to reapply with the exact same application. Typically, there's a legal doctrine called res judicata, which loosely translated means the thing already decided, and that bars someone from just resubmitting serially the same application once they've received a determination. So Mr. Hoffman and I would need to parse the code, but typically that wouldn't be allowed. They would have to make a material change to their application to address the substance of Mr. Hoffman's determination or whatever the council decides on this appeal.
Well, I was just thinking if they're not available tonight, and I mean, I would lean toward agreeing with staff as far as rejecting their appeal since they're not here. But if in the future there's, they can make it and they're really ready to talk to us about it, I'd hate to preclude them from being able to present their case.
Their case would need to be specific to the appeal hearing. Any modifications or changes that they would bring, discuss with the counter, should be a new submittal and a new determination.
And
Just your concern, Mark, is that this dragging on and on and on could impede other investors or businesses from taking a serious look at this space.
That and
harm
given
the city
that there's
harm the city in that regard.
Yeah, in our opinion, there's no relation to this appeal hearing and somebody occupying the space. We just view it as clouding the situation.
Right. Mark, can you speak to what is the relevance of this particular space in the context of the entire retail center? What role does it play? Why are you as a community development director inclined to be so protective of it as
Mayor,
a retail?
point of order, how is that relevant to the applicant and its appeal?
I think it's directly relevant because it goes to the question of uses.
I don't necessarily agree.
No, I respectfully disagree with the line of questioning here. One, whether or not this remains open for some retail consideration is not within the responsibility of the city, that is the property owner and any applicants. We cannot dictate when these things occur. So that is probably inappropriate for you.
I'm not a decision maker here. I'm going to refrain. I'll withdraw my question. I respectfully disagree, but for the purposes of moving on, I'll withdraw my question.
And Mr. Mayor, if I can, just point of clarification that as far as the determination and bringing it forward to council tonight, both Mr. Hoffman and I have attempted to reach the attorney for Persona, with whom we'd previously been in touch both by telephone and in writing, and he has not responded to either of our calls. And the code section that allows for the interpretation to be appealed states that the council shall hear and determine the matter as expeditiously as possible. And it doesn't provide a hard and fast time frame, and we're now multiple months, a quarter of a year out from when the appeal came in. So that's really the driving force in needing to get it resolved, as the code says we need to do that.
Councilmember Lassay.
Is it required for the appeal for the applicant to be present?
It does not state that, no.
So there's no, if the applicant's here or not here, it's irrelevant to the appeal?
The council can still hear and determine in the appeal, correct. And
Thank you.
That's the same as if a party had an appeal to the Court of Appeals. I have seen parties not appear. It's rare, and the court takes the case up and considers it and issues its ruling.
Councilmember Shepherd.
So I heard that there were letters that were placed for all of us to read from Persona. Is that right?
That's what I said.
Was that tonight? Or
No, it was
at a
like
prior?
November or December.
So we didn't get it, whatever that letter was.
Right.
I
Is
don't
he
know
trying
what
to
the
say-
reference to the letter is, but I believe it's the David Cow letter that was also sent by email, and that's one of the three that were given to Anne Marie for tonight, and with Bob back, Bob has those 3 email chains. So it would be the David Cow letter, who's the owner of the IGA space. That would be back in last November.
I believe that's the letter that Councilmember Sundwall referred to, or email, excuse me.
All right, any other questions or deliberations, council, on this issue? Okay, with that, I'm going to suggest that we move to Agenda Bill 19032, staff recommendation, under Committee of the Whole, a staff recommendation to deny the appeal by Persona Nutrition of the Community Development Director's land use interpretation, thus upholding the determination that the proposed proportion of warehouse and distribution uses are inconsistent with the permissible land uses for 773 Center Boulevard, Southeast Snoqualmie. If I could have a motion, please.
And Mr. Mayor, I neglected to offer the council the opportunity, if it wishes, to have deliberations in a closed session that is allowed specifically by the Open Public Meetings Act, that you can have a discussion in a closed session for that portion of a quasi-judicial body which relates to a quasi-judicial matter then pending in front of you. So the council may not want to do that, but it's an option. I wanted to make sure to point that out.
Anyone's prepared to? Councilor,
Are we?
Councilor Mayhew.
I move to deny the appeal by Persona Nutrition of the Community Development Director's land use interpretation, thus upholding the determination that the proposed proportion of warehouse and distribution uses are inconsistent with the permissible land uses for 7730 Center Boulevard, Southeast Snoqualmie.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve Agenda Bill 19032 as stated by Councilor Mayhew. Is there any further discussion, council? Is there any member of the public that would like to speak to this item prior to action?
I didn't think you could.
I thought you couldn't.
You're not allowed to.
That's right. It's
Well, now we're in an agenda bill, so is it,
It's an appeal, it's limited participation. I'm sorry, participation is limited to the appellant and
Okay.
the city.
I wasn't altogether clear now that we were in an agenda bill. So, all right, thank you, Bob.
Doesn't change that part.
All right, with that, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. All right, thank you. With that, we'll go back to top of the agenda here. I'm pleased to say that whereas the city of Snoqualmie derives much of its vitality, charm, and livability from the citizens who live, work, and recreate here, and whereas the city of Snoqualmie encourages, supports, and facilitates citizen volunteer participation in the delivery of city services, and whereas Snoqualmie's volunteers represent a diverse cross-section of our community coming from all walks of life, working together to increase the quality of life within our community, and whereas volunteers have contributed hours in listening, planning, analyzing, and making decisions that benefit all citizens. And whereas it is fitting that a special time be set aside to honor and recognize the contributions of our city's volunteers who give so generously to our community, now therefore I, Matthew R. Larson, Mayor of the City of Snoqualmie, Washington, on behalf of the citizens of Snoqualmie, City Council, and City staff, do hereby recognize and proclaim Wednesday, April 10th, 2019, to be Volunteer Appreciation Day in the City of Snoqualmie, and urge all citizens to recognize and extend appreciation. And we are going to have our big annual volunteer appreciation event this Wednesday night up at the clubhouse. So I think we have 2 council members coming. Councilmember Sundwall and Shepherd, if others have not had a chance, you'd still love to have you join. I think we've got over about 120 people or so coming. And
105.
105, yeah, should be fun. A little entertainment. So as not to do a gift of public funds, Jody's always been successful in having some local companies and businesses support the event so we can bring all the families. And it's not one more evening away from your family, but you get to bring the family along. So, all right. So with that, we will move on to the presentation on finance software replacement project. PJ.
Good evening, Council. PJ Rodriguez, IT Director, City of Snoqualmie. We're just here to give you a brief, give Council a brief overview of our ERP project. And our goal really is to provide an insight into the project, a high-level overview, and give you a status of that, challenges, opportunities, and timelines. Marilyn's actually our IT project manager. She will be the one doing the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to start first with giving an overview of what I will cover. Thanks. First, I'm going to present the approach for the project. I've been working with the City of Snoqualmie for about a month and a half, almost 2 months now, and I've gotten to know several of the folks in our organization. And as I am learning more about how the operations of the city work, I'm taking a look at our ERP system and breaking it out into a two-phased approach for a project. This is a very, very large project impacting all areas of the city. The first phase will be a discovery phase. This is the phase that I'm currently working on with employees. We are documenting as is business processes, trying to get a handle of what are our existing processes today. We can't migrate to something if we don't understand what we have. Additionally, we are putting together an as-is enterprise architecture diagram. This tells us all the different systems that we have currently running within the city and how they currently interact with each other. Once our discovery phase is more or less complete, we begin the analysis phase where we begin to identify the gaps in our processes and areas where we can definitely leverage a new system to enhance process efficiencies and have better controls. The results of that phase are to develop a high-level set of requirements for an ERP system, and then take it through the RFP process, and with the help of vendors, have a proposal for an implementation, and that would be phase 2.
So, I guess question at this point.
Sure.
Is there consideration of looking at the existing systems that are out there and to see if we can use them out of the box more to modify our process to match the software versus modify the software to match our processes? The latter is a little more expensive.
Absolutely. So the way we're approaching it is we're looking at it from a process perspective versus a systems perspective. So when I am going to the different teams and talking to them about their operations, I'm looking at it from a process perspective and not at how they're using the system today, right? So the reason we do that is because sometimes our business processes are dictated by the limitations of our system, and we want to be looking at it as how can we fix the overall process rather than just how can we kind of fit something that doesn't really fit into a box.
I'm not sure we're talking the same thing, but we can talk later.
Okay.
Or she might get to it.
Go ahead.
Marilyn, are you happy to take questions during the presentation?
Sure, absolutely.
Or do you want to get through? Okay.
No, go ahead and ask, because this is a lot of material, actually, and I think that by the time I get to the end, there might be some questions that may have been forgotten as I was going along the way.
I don't want to give them permission to make it a 45-minute presentation. Too, so.
This is a 45-minute presentation?
No, I don't want to.
It's only 6 slides, so I hope not. Council Shepherd.
So I know that they were working on implementing an ERP system over in Issaquah.
Mm-hmm.
Did you talk to the?
I did.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
Okay.
we had a conversation. I asked him about his lessons learned advice, and they've offered to help us along the way as well.
Because I know sometimes it can be quite challenging to be successful in an ERP implementation.
Right, and that's why I'm suggesting a phased approach, is because it gives us an opportunity to learn from our lessons as we roll it out. Yeah. So phase 2, once we've selected a vendor, and this is now we're looking into the following year, is to develop an actual implementation and migration plan with a vendor. So when we're looking at out-of-the-box solutions, this is the point where if we need to do customization, we would need to work on those pieces. But the idea here is that a lot of our basic accounting functions like accounts payable and accounts receivable, they're fairly standardized, and there are some tweaks that may need to be made, and that would be at this point in the design phase that would be discovered, and we would make the technical requirements at that point. Once we have our design built, then we would conduct a rolling implementation, and I'll cover that in a couple of slides. We'll also conduct testing to ensure that anything that we implement is actually functional and doesn't cause any widespread issues before we actually go off to implement and deploy. And then we'll have a continued monitoring and support phase after we've rolled out each module. So this is the timeline, the projected timeline for the project. Currently, I'm in the as-is documentation process phase of the project. I'm hoping to have all finance processes documented before the end of April and have a thorough gap analysis sometime by mid to end of May. Hopefully that will take us into the RFP process by September and begin vendor selection by December before the end of the year. So this is what I mean by a phased approach. Rather than trying to roll out a full ERP all in one shot, my suggestion would be to take this in a rolling phase iteration. So starting with the process areas that have the least customer-facing and employee-facing impacts. So starting with reporting and analytics, the financial statements, the general ledger. And then once we've had those implemented, going into another round of implementation with revenue, accounts payable, accounts receivable, and cash, and finally with billing, payroll, and project management. Questions?
Councilmember Ross?
So will this tie to the purchasing area and also to like Parks and Public Works? I mean, will it all tie together?
Yes, it would. That's what the enterprise integration piece in the middle would be to, at the end of the project, we would have a full system integration with our existing systems that we have in place in other departments.
Okay. Good.
I wanted to point out a few risks. So this is, as you can see, a very big project, and it will impact every organization, and an effective organizational change management strategy is going to be critical to the success of this project. We are going to be changing a lot of processes, mainly because with a new ERP systems come with a lot of inherent controls that will be required to implement. And it will also require a significant amount of employee time in order to validate and test and ensure that what we implement is actually implemented correctly. Any additional questions?
Councilmember Shepherd?
Is this going to stay within budget?
That is a very good question.
The answer is yes. It will stay within budget.
And so would your best scenario, it'd take about 4 years to implement? Is that what we're looking at, 5 years?
Well, right now, we're hoping to have a phase 2 finalized by 2022.
Okay. Have you done this before?
I have.
Good.
Councilmember Ross?
You answered it already. Thank you.
Councilmember Mayhew, once you formulate the question.
So I think this.
Councilmember Mayhew, could you pull the microphone closer, please?
Yeah, that was so I wouldn't talk until I was ready. I have a significant number of, I have a number of significant concerns, and I wonder if you're planning to bring this to any committee, or is this all just going to happen at, like, is council input going to happen? I'm trying to figure out if I should list all my concerns now, or if there'll be some other, like if this will be going in front of F&A committee, for example, maybe it'd be more appropriate to bring those concerns up, you know, where some more time could get spent making sure that I sort of explain my concerns and there's time to respond to those.
So right now, we're in the, gathering phase. We're in the analysis phase. I guess I would be, I would like to ask what do you envision as the role would be in terms of, or concerns that you might have? Maybe we can address it now, or maybe we can take it offline a bit.
All right, so there's a couple. The biggest concern I have is right now we're over a year ago, or roughly a year ago, I think, we received a report from an outside consultant looking at our internal controls and processes in the accounting department. And there was a set of concerns that were raised. And to date, I have not seen those concerns comprehensively addressed. We have heard from Finance Director on some of the more urgent things that were in there. So some things sort of cried out to be addressed right away, and I think they were. But there were some that would take a little bit more time. And one of those, as I recall, was lack of documentation of many of our processes. Now, maybe I'm misstating that, and if so, I apologize. But there was some level of documentation that I thought I understood to be missing. So what I'm concerned about broadly by the comments I'm making right now is that if we have internal control issues or process issues, meaning things that the finance director might like to change in terms of our processes or our internal controls, it would seem to me very important that that happen before you start implementing a new system. The sort of term that comes to mind is Bill Gates used to talk about in some books he authored, the notion of paving the cow path, right? What we're going to do is end up with really windy roads that don't make sense because we should have built a straight road. So you want to fix things for what you're trying to do before you put the IT system in place is broadly what I'm sort of trying to drive at. And so that's broadly my concern is right now I have the belief that there's a bunch of unresolved control or at least process documentation issues that I would think when you put an April date up there, and maybe I misunderstood it, but I just thought that didn't sort of fit with my understanding of where the timeline for fixing those things.
Right, so that April date is the date that I'm hoping to have all the as-is process documentation completed with the finance team. So currently I'm working with the finance team in documenting their processes. So I've been helping them outline what those processes are and get into the real details of how is it that they conduct their daily operations, because I completely 100% agree with you that we cannot be putting the solution in front of the process. We have to understand what those processes are and where the gaps are. So that's why the gap analysis is the task that immediately follows the as-is process documentation.
Robert, could you add to that to confirm as the finance director?
Yes.
Those are the specific issues in the Clark-Nuber report that are being addressed. Yeah, okay.
Right. So what's been very nice about working with Marilyn and PJ's team so far is they're also asking us what's not working, what don't you have? So we're trying to answer both questions. So as we go through, when we've talked before to the F&A committee regarding workflow concerns, accounts payable, fixed asset booking, we want to make sure that those needs are part of the RFP. And so the RFP, I'm sure, will come as draft form to council before it goes out. So we're going to make sure all those addressed. Council will have feedback on that as well. But yeah, they're working with us every step of the way. So again, what our shortcomings are, because some of the shortcomings that were outlined by the report were technologically based, but also as we go forward, some of the bolder items that we're looking at, say 5 years ahead, we want to make sure we get there, GAP being one of them, switching to GAP. Will this system allow us to switch to GAP? Will it allow for ease of financial reporting, ease of booking fixed assets? So yes, we're looking at everything.
I just want to add to that, Councilmember Mayhew. We fully intend to work with all the stakeholders that need to be part of this process, understanding that it is a core piece of our infrastructure. It's an enterprise application. We know how many pieces tie into this product. So we want to make sure, like you said, hey, we want to inventory what's in our toolbox first. What do we have right now? And then let's take a look at that. Right now, we're documenting those processes and figuring out, hey, how do we actually do payroll? I don't want to know what's in your head. I want to put that in paper so that we can actually visualize that and then analyze where those gaps might be. And then along with that, we want to make sure that those documents like the Clark-Nuber report, that along with finance, we're able to integrate those pieces within the system. We're going to work closely with finance to make sure we add those pieces.
So PJ, just to clarify, when you said, how do we do payroll, you're also answering the question is how should we do payroll, or how should we do any system?
Absolutely.
So
right.
you're addressing both of those in that analysis before you move to a new system.
Yeah, you don't realize where your gaps are until you actually put how you process it now and actually visualize it and say, oh, why do we do it that way? And then you start seeing where those gaps are, right, and how you can better perform.
We'll just continue with you, Councilmember Mayhew, and then we'll go to Councilmember Shepherd.
Yes, so I think the mayor's comment is exactly the concern I have.
Okay.
I actually have some experience with finance systems implementation. And the place it goes wrong, there are many places it can go wrong, but one of the major places it goes wrong is, and again, this thing I may be beating a dead horse, but this notion of taking what's done and then figuring out how to automate that well.
Sure.
When what's done is not what should be done. All right? And that is, in accounting systems, something that comes up far more than I think than any other system. Because internal controls in accounting, one person can't do anything. Always requires two people. Are there ways around approvals? Are there, all kinds of very technical questions that accountants worry about, CPAs worry about, that system people may not be tuned into. You're more tuned into, how do I make this work, and sort of what obviously could go wrong, but not necessarily the kinds of accounting controls that accountants get real focused on. And so that's what I think it's, my concern would just be to make sure that you have ample time, and it sounds like you've been through one of these before, but that you have ample time to really get a handle on our unique issues that are unresolved, resolving those before we move forward, because that may require a fair amount of changing what does happen, to something that should happen differently.
And let me give you a specific example of how we're doing something immediately that was in the Clark-Newberg report. It's the timekeeping system. We're going to automatic timesheets. We're doing that on the current system as we speak, because that was one of the main concerns that they had in breaking the payroll differently than we're doing right now and documenting more of those procedures. So that's already happening. So yes, we're doing as much as we can. There's going to be a limitation with our current ERP eventually on, do we want to book all our fixed assets in the system to rebook them in another system? Questions like that as we go in the future. So we're doing as much as we can now. There's going to be certain pieces where we can't, but we're trying to document everything. And the answer to the question I know you're going to ask, and probably already asked in this, is yes, we should have been documenting processes in the finance department a little bit more than we did. And we're going to make sure from this point forward, especially when I started, that we're updating it, because people's jobs and their roles and their functions change. A good example of that is the business license streamline ordinance that was passed in December. That actually added one little step to our process in the system. But those are the things that Maryland's trying to gather. How do you do your job? That's changed a little bit. So those are things that we're making sure we incorporate into this.
All right, so just to finish that point, Mayor, I would think if you could build in, and maybe it goes into your gap analysis kind of phasing, but I would think that the council, to the extent we're signing off on this, I would think we would want to hear some very clear conclusions about the Clark-Nuber report, any concerns were brought up by state auditor and past audits, and these internal control matters, and process matters, those have been addressed in the plan, so a clear reporting back to us so that we can feel comfortable that that's been addressed. So if you could just maybe, I guess my request, I don't know if my fellow council members agree, but my request would be that you build in that kind of a clear report back to us into the process.
And
we
maybe
can
some
do
of those
that.
details we
Absolutely.
could bring back to a report to the FNA in more detail, so we're not, yeah. Councilmember Shepherd.
So one thing that I'd like to see is some sort of a flow diagram when you're identifying what the current functionality is. Sometimes a visual is a lot easier to follow than a bunch of text. And I think that it does become a pile of spaghetti after a while when you get a really big system going on, and you can get lost. And I'd also like to see a little more detail as far as what currently is functioning and our wish list, you know, just so that I can rest assured that you're covering, like, I want to see a purchase order reconciliation system. I don't know if that's going to be built into this ERP or not.
That's on our list, yes.
Okay, so
Absolutely.
but I think if you just come back with just some of the, and it's not like it's the end of the list, but maybe the things that you've identified so far, and we can say, okay, I won't ask about that anymore, because I see it on your list, your to-do list, basically.
Sure, I think we fully plan to kind of keep the council updated on where we are in this process on a regular basis.
So when, will we hear back from you, say, next month, or?
Probably not next month.
Yeah, I'd say at this point, by the end of the month for the next council meeting, I'll just be wrapping up all the as-is process documentation. So that's just getting a handle of how we're doing things today.
Next check-in, maybe 2 months from now, 3 months from now, what?
Maybe 3 months from now would look more along those
Okay.
lines. So
Yeah.
it depends on, our challenge is resources internally we're capped in how fast we can do these things in terms of if finance staff is in the middle of something, it's difficult to get those resources because they do have jobs to do on a
Right.
regular basis, unfortunately. So.
Councilmember Holloway.
So I guess 2 points. One, I'm curious as to when this got on the council agenda, because I do not remember being discussed in F&A. And I take umbrage of us violating the agenda between F&A and now.
This is a citywide system. We felt it'd be easier to take it to the full council since there was so much interest amongst the council members.
Second, well, I guess my half point then is I would have preferred you brought it to F&A before the council. I believe the finance system is in the purview of F&A. Third is I would like to continue this conversation in F&A because I've just come off a major ERP system, larger definition of ERP than what you're talking, and I'm not seeing some of the things that you really do need to avoid. I'm not sure at this stage I really care how you use the current system. At this stage, you should be talking about tool independent, what does the process need to do? And that goes into functional specifications. You then look at the tools that are out there and say, can they do that? And you do the gap analysis between your ideal functional specifications and the tools, not your existing processes. And I will also warn you that what you're talking about, every system has 3 facets to it at least: process, tool, and data. I've heard no discussion about the data or how to define the data that you're using. I will advise you that in the larger sense of ERPs, 50% of the projects fail because of lack of consideration of the data. So I would appreciate further conversation.
So I would suggest we move on.
Yeah.
This is the first time we've heard of it. To expect some massive, comprehensive thing that I would have needed 3 more caffeinated beverages to get through. This was just to me, this was a courtesy. Here's where we are. I don't think the point of this was to dissect it. So F&A would be a great place to do that because I won't be there. So I would just propose that we move on for the day and just, first of all, welcome to the city.
Thank you.
Good job so far. As you'll find in this council, there's lots of people who have lots of experience outside of just sitting behind here drinking sodas and making laws. So hopefully that'll be a good thing.
Thank you, council.
Thank you.
Thank you, PJ. Councilmember Mayhew.
Just 2 things, just if you could include in future presentations. I didn't at all follow the phased approach and how that would work? In the sense of I understood what you said, but I didn't understand how you would actually go about doing that. That struck me as, how the heck do you do that? So I'd love to hear more about how that works. And then the third thing is, and I think this is really important, every system implementation I've been involved with, and there have been many, one of the enormous issues is accounting staff availability. And so what happens is they're needed for requirements definition. You guys are fully aware of this, right? Requirements definition for all kinds of implementation or decision-making around the software that you're going to pick and the functionality that's available, all kinds of functionality implementation decisions that you make, and then all kinds of user acceptance testing. It's an enormous staff draw, and usually requires bringing in additional staff resources to either backfill, usually to backfill, because you need to take your key people and put them into those tasks. So just want to make sure that you've thought about that. Maybe you could.
Number 3 on there.
Let's go. Okay, maybe you could tell us more about how you're going to accomplish that
At a later date.
At a later date.
Yep.
Yes? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Holloway, I wanted to clarify, I had to leave the F&A meeting early. Did the final agenda coming out of F&A not have this item?
Did not have this item in it.
Okay, so we'll discuss the staff tomorrow.
Take, again,
All right,
F&A
thank
does not consider just F&A things. We agree on what the
Yeah,
agenda
no, if the
is.
mayor or the administration certainly has the purview to add things to the agenda, but the agenda should be finally baked when it goes to the last F&A meeting. So we'll discuss it at executive staff. Thank you for bringing that to my attention.
Mayor, I just want to mention again, this was very important for the entire council to hear the brief overview we were hoping to have. We didn't want to get into a lot of detail, frankly, but here we are. So we were happy to bring it back to F&A, but I thought it was very important to start with the full council. So they're well aware of what's going on.
Right.
All right, given that we're just starting the meeting, we're now to citizens' comments. At this time, we will provide time for citizens' comment items not on the agenda. First, a few ground rules. First, Snoqualmie citizens who are not present have a right to have their elected representatives perform their duties on behalf of the city in an efficient, orderly manner. Therefore, our apologies, but we must limit comments to 3 minutes each. 2, please wait to be recognized. Come to the podium and state your name and address for the record. 3, direct your comments to the council as a whole and do not to individual members. In order to protect the privacy rights of employees and to protect the members of the public from legal liability, please note that this is not an appropriate venue to make complaints or accusations about an implied or named city employee or agent. Such oral comments will not be allowed but can be submitted in writing to the city clerk. 4, please note that this is not a time to ask questions of the council, mayor, or staff, or to engage in debate. The council will quietly and respectfully listen to your concerns. And last, please respect the decorum of these proceedings, as all due respect will be afforded to you. With that, would anybody like to speak? Fuzzy Fletcher.
Nice clock. Council, Mayor, 3 things, so I'll make it really quick. Number 1, I wanted to say thank you for the town hall meeting the other day. I thought it was really, really important. I thought it was well done. I liked the way the whole thing worked out. So I would appreciate it if you'd have some more of them as time allows. Second issue is that I'd like to thank the IT department and Jody for working with me. We're going to continue to work to see if we can make the microphones louder or my hearing better. I'm not sure which one we're going to be able to work out, but we're working on it. So thank you for allowing the time to do that. And there was a gentleman during the town hall meeting that expressed concerns about hearing or the ability to hear. So it's more than just me. So thank you for that, and we'll continue to work on it. Lastly, I'm here to officially make a declaration. I'll be running for city council position number 4, which happens to be Mr. Mayhew's position, but I wanted to make it public, and this is the way I do it. So thank you for your time. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Fuzzy. William Donaldson.
William Donaldson, 8203 Park Avenue Southeast. Mayor Larson and City Council. In a city consisting of homes as desirable as these and growth in King County exceeding expectations and accelerating each year, many infrastructural issues can be expected to arise regularly. These are the issues we face, and most paramount among them today, at least judging by popular concern, is the heavy vehicle traffic that congests our roads. The I-90 SR18 interchange redesign and on-ramp is a very necessary amendment that cannot be completed soon enough. You've told us on many occasions that at the present time, financial hurdles are what bar our progress. Solving unexpected and perhaps unfair financial needs requires creativity, and I wonder if this government has exhausted all of its options. We can all agree that this project carries great impact to our growing city, but I'm sure there's no shortage of discourse about how to best proceed with footing the bill. Snoqualmie and its surrounding neighborhoods are home to an extraordinary number of affluent citizens, some of them very much so, and currently occupying very high-paying jobs. In our free market economy and our government by the people, we often face difficult decisions where we may find ourselves forcing hard-working taxpayers, with or without plenty, to contribute more when they already pay their share. But in recent times, it seems this is not the most effective approach, especially where there are those wealthy and generous among us who seek, from time to time, worthy acts of philanthropy. Is not our most trafficked arterial road a product of such generosity? And do those most affluent among us not also share roads traveled by so many? We are contemplating ways to pass new taxes, and yet I'm told that a recent fundraiser which took place at the club at Snoqualmie Ridge was able to source $100,000 over the course of a single day for Cascade View Elementary's art program. Why have we not exhausted crowd-funded avenues like this for such a vital construction project? I believe there is space for a park alongside such an on-ramp, and within that park I believe there is also space for a plaque or monument dedicated to and immortalizing the invaluable contributions made by all that were able and willing to better this community. Let us not forget that this interchange is trafficked regularly by the entire Snoqualmie Valley. Surely among these fortunate and generous people, we can recover the funds necessary to push this initiative forward in new, innovative ways. I suggest we begin a voluntary fundraiser for the interchange. Thank you.
Thank you, William. Is there, those folks signed up? Is there anyone else who didn't have a chance to sign up to Julie? Julie Lake?
Julie Lake, Box 1748. Yeah, I would like to thank you for the town hall as well. I wasn't able to attend, but I saw the recording of it, and I'm really grateful for Dick Shield for recording it, and I really think that'd be a good thing for the city to record. There are three things in my proofreader's mind. I catch things, as you know, that slip by a lot of people. When William, I believe it was William, mentioned there's some homeless people camping out at the empty houses across the street from him. I won't mention names, but one of you made a snarky non sequitur saying, fortunately, the city doesn't pay for the homeless to have drugs. Now, this has nothing to do with us. Apparently, it was a reflection from the Como opinion piece, courtesy of Sinclair Broadcasting, that was all about how nasty Seattle is. But there's so many things wrong with that. Like, the homeless sounds to me like the blacks, the illegals, the this, the that. These are our neighbors who, due to unfortunate circumstances, they don't all take drugs. The vast majority of homeless people are children. So just to imply that homeless equals drugs equals some program in Seattle paying for the homeless to have drugs, that was just an inappropriate, snarky non sequitur. So I'd like that kind of non sequitur to stop. It's just really inappropriate. Also, two other odd things, and maybe you didn't realize you did it, but one of the council members raised his hand when asked if he was working. And this is one who says he's retired, so maybe you got mixed up. But I was curious about that. And then I also noticed that one council member was about the only person in the whole room who did not raise his hand when the moderator asked, should we do this again? And one of you did not raise your hand. So I just wanted to say that was noticeable, and it might have been noticeable to other citizens. So yeah, that's all. I just really want to have the snarky non sequiturs used to try to make a point about I don't know what to stop. Okay, thanks.
All right, thank you, Julie. Is there anybody else that would like an opportunity to speak? All right, seeing no one else move forward, we will move on to the consent agenda, or the minutes, rather. Move to approve or can I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So
for the
moved.
2000, yeah.
Second.
Sorry, could you make the motion to approve the minutes for the March 25th, 2019 council meeting?
I move.
Yeah, I didn't get to state
So
that.
moved.
Yeah, okay.
Second.
Thank you. All right. Motion and a second to approve the minutes for the March 25th, 2019 city council meetings, as stated by Councilmember Holloway. Any discussion, council? Is there any member of the public that would like to comment on this item prior to action? Seeing no one move forward, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. With that, we'll move down to reports. Parks and Public Works Committee, Agenda Bill 19033, reject all bids for the Koinonia Park Improvement Project.
In July 2018, City Council approved bid solicitation for the Koinonia Park Improvement Project. Staff received no responsive bids. The project was rebid in December 2018, due January 17th, 2019. 3 bids were received for a project budgeted for $297,000. The low bid was $540,836, which is $243,836 over the project budget. Move to reject all bids for the Koinonia Park Improvement Project.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to, for Agenda Bill 19033, as stated by Councilmember Summel. Councilmember Summel.
So I didn't lose my notes this time. We met on this last week, and basically just kind of there's quite a few numbers floating around here, but the $297,000 is was budgeted for this project. There was an additional $75,000 in grant money that was approved to bring us roughly to what the engineer's bid of $361 was. The engineer's bid 361 was clearly lower than significantly lower than what the bids came out to be. I will remind folks that this money is from the 2018 budget, so this has not come out of the biennial budget that we approved at the end of the year. So this is moving forward from 2018. And what I will say, the last thing I'll say is that the reason for rejecting all those bids is A, we don't have the money to pay for it, and B, we need to scale back some of the work that was proposed. Much of the really expensive stuff involved a lot of earth moving and stuff like that, and so we need to. The team is going to go back and reevaluate that. This is not suggesting that Koinonia Park will not be improved. It's just we need to go back to the drawing board and revise the scope of the work. And if I didn't do a great job of that, then we can have someone from the group come up.
Councilmember Mayhew.
Just get some. Oh, the guy to your left might want to be listening. I just want to get some clarity on how it would appear that we've double budgeted this money then, because the 1920 budget budgeted the full fund balance, which means that if we're still pulling some of that fund balance for an 18 budget, we would have double budgeted that amount. It's because we've appropriated the full fund balance in 19, but I just heard that this would be paid for out of an 18 budget, which means it would also come out of the fund balance, so that's not possible.
So is your argument that there is enough money for the $540,000?
I'm unclear about.
I'm being facetious.
Okay.
Go ahead, Sam.
So I was actually looking at the approved budget today, and I recall specifically, so it's 300,000 is actually budgeted for this year in the approved 2019-2020 budget. So I think the intention is that while we would probably be sourcing it from the 297 fund balance, and a little change left over, there isn't additional parks projects that are budgeted to be completed this year. Currently, the rest of that money is being assessed in a capital improvement program analysis at staff level, where we will come to you later in the year with a recommended set of projects that would then probably amend the budget with additional capital projects after you've viewed and potentially even rearranged those staff recommendations. So, but currently, to my knowledge, there is a $300,000 appropriation for this year, with the rest of the fund balance remaining.
So just to be clear, I'm raising a procedural question. I'm
understand.
not objecting to this project.
I understand.
And I agree with everything I just heard, and it appears to further make my point, which is that are we pulling it out of the the 19 appropriation or the 18 appropriation? Because if we're pulling it out of the 18 appropriation, we're over appropriated for 19.
Right. I believe I stated this accurately, but you
Dan?
can.
No, as we go through this process, as you know, we're doing an internal CIP review process. This is one of the already approved projects, so this is already going to come out of the 19 budget because that's what we're operating under now. But if something in the 19 budget, if we spend it down, then there's other projects that we won't fund.
Yeah, so just to be clear then, just to clarify Councilmember Sunwall's comment, it actually would come out of the 19 appropriation.
That is correct, yes.
Thank you.
So you're saying Councilmember Sunwall caused all this?
It would appear so, yes.
That's the first today.
Councilmember-
So what?
Councilmember Sunwall. Go ahead.
Better way to say it is we agreed in the budget process to shift the 2018 dollars to 2019, call it fund balance, whatever, right? And this is the only approved project from that forwarded money in capital project for parks until we decide what we're going to do with the capital CIP, the CIP, right? Which we might build 17 new parks, probably not. But this is the only thing funded under kind of the prior pre-CIP stuff, right? And anything else that would happen in parks in terms of capital projects would need to be funded through the CIP that hasn't been thoroughly vetted or approved.
Have to come
So
back
I
to
think what
council,
you're saying
yes.
is there's a lot of capital money we pushed aside and said it doesn't have a string attached to anything.
Right.
This pot of money did have a string attached when it rolled forward to 2019-20. Said this project will be completed. That's what you're saying.
Yes, but the moral of the story is Koinonia Park is going to be renovated. We just have to scale back and focus on the essentials of this. Would that be a correct summary of what we talked about last week?
Yes,
Okay.
that is correct.
Councilmember Ross, and I'll come back.
So it was bid twice, right? And we pulled back the bids because they were more than what the consultant that designed it proposed, right, or estimated. Why is such the big difference?
The quickest answer is that although we hired a firm with 30 years of experience, we had a parks designer with less. It was a younger parks designer. And so basically there was some of those estimates, the amount of ground moving and earth moving that was necessary was not correctly calculated, and the cost per unit for some of these items was not really correctly calculated. So as a result, the person basically designed a project that was too expensive. So this project has now migrated to a different person with more experience that is removing some of those items we now know are too expensive and more appropriately calibrating the per unit costs in order to get us a project within budget.
Well, Nicole, one of the high-cost items was in addition to the earth moving, was water drainage issues.
Right.
A lot of water percolating under this park that required expensive drainage. And
Yes, that's another, so there's a sort of lower and an upper park area, sort of field area. We were hoping to level out and put in some drainage to basically stop some of the muddy issues that make that field a little suboptimal. But at this time, we don't think that's within budget, partially because there's a lot of water moving through the site, and processing that was just, it's over what we have money for. The end game is that we want a playground that's playable and fun, and so that's really our focus at this time.
Councilmember Jeans.
So a number of setbacks, and now we're back on track to doing it within budget. These poor people have been waiting for a long time. I wonder when we might expect to improve their park.
We're hoping to rebid this spring and basically build this summer. We have a grant requirement that we have to get it in the ground before the fall, basically, so.
I assume Bruce Dees and Associates just taking some responsibility for this delay or this, oversight.
Yeah.
undersite. All right. Any other questions, council? All right. Is there any member of the public that would like to comment on this item prior to action? Seeing no one, move forward. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. Is there any other report for Parks and Public Works Committee?
None.
Development Committee, Agenda Bill 19034, approve the 2019 relocation policy for the Riverfront Acquisitions Program and authorize the mayor to conduct up to 3 relocation assistant payments in 2019.
Move to approve the 2019 relocation policy for the Riverfront Acquisitions Program and authorize the mayor to conduct up to 3 relocation assistance payments in 2019.
Second.
I have motion and a second to approve Agenda Bill 19034 as stated by Councilmember Mayhew. Any discussion, Council? Councilmember Mayhew.
Just report to my fellow council members, just to reiterate, as is in the staff report, this is at no cost to the city. All of the cost of this is paid for through grant funds or FEMA funds. The reason this is being brought forward, as mentioned there, but I'll just reemphasize, is that it's a requirement when we're expending federal funds, which we are. This is FEMA funding for at least part of this. It requires that relocation assistance be paid if the current residents who are being dislocated out of these properties, if the renters are at below market rent, including their utilities, and that amount of below market rent exceeds $7,200 as compared to comparable replacement available housing. The amount of payment is something that we can set by policy, and so that's what this policy would do. The 15,000 cap is a cap that is used by King County agency that does similar types of activities. And so we thought staff thought is relevant to us as well. It also is consistent with our own staff study of what those costs would be, and so it seemed like an appropriate amount for our area. The committee development committee sort of questioned staff on this in some depth and concurred with those conclusions by staff.
All right. Any further discussion, Council?
Did you want to take public comment first?
Oh, sorry. Yes, correct. Is there any member of the public that would like to comment on this item prior to action? All right. Seeing no one can step forward. I guess it was the chair doing the description first that threw me. Thanks, Jim. Any other comment or discussion, Council? All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion is carried. Any other report for Community Development Committee?
No further report.
Finance Administration Committee, Agenda Bill, I'm sorry, don't want to forget it.
Warrants.
Approval of warrants. Can someone make a motion to approve the warrants, please? As stated in the agenda packet.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the warrants as stated in the agenda packet. Is there any member of the public that would like to comment on this item prior to action? All right, is there any discussion, Council? Councilmember Holloway.
So as part of the F&A deliberations in general on warrants, on March 18th, it was acknowledged with Councilmember Shepherd in presence that Councilmember Shepherd would not consent to warrant consent agenda items until her prior questions on warrants were addressed. At that time, F&A agreed to, per the process we have put in place this year, to review prior questions if Councilmember Shepherd would collect and resubmit. On the March 18th meeting, Councilmember Shepherd agreed to that, and we proceeded on. As of April 1st, F&A committee had received one question to review. We reviewed the question, however, the committee determined it was inappropriate to review individual business B&O tax returns at the level being requested. However, graciously, staff and some of the committee members took the action to at least proceed into our next F&A meeting discussing examples of B&O activities that might result in the warrant in question. At this stage, we are still waiting for Councilmember Shepherd to develop a list of unanswered questions so that we may go through that. Therefore, barring further discovery, F&A committee recommends approval of these warrants as submitted into the agenda package.
All right, Councilmember Shepherd.
Okay, so we have made some progress on getting some responses to my questions. I did get a response about the B&O tax. It's still kind of, there's still an aspect of the answer that I'm somewhat curious about, but I did get a recollection of how the refund had happened for 4 years, a total of $15,000 for one business. So we don't have the detail of exactly what the exemption was and how it came about, but in general, it looks like there's really no documentation.
Councilmember Shepherd, are you speaking about an item pertinent to the current warrants on this agenda tonight, or ones back in March or last year?
I'm referring to ones back in March.
Okay, for those purposes, I'm going to rule that that's not germane and ask that you move on if there, direct your questions toward those on the agenda tonight. Do you have any questions on the warrants that are on the agenda tonight?
No.
Okay. Councilmember Mayhew and then Councilmember Sunwell.
Withdraw my question.
So I'm confused. If there's, why were these pulled from consent if there's no issues with these warrants?
It says Councilmember Mayhew described last time more of a protest vote to try to elicit some action, to elicit some participation.
Okay.
So, all right. Councilmember Mayhew and then Councilmember Ross.
Withdraw the question.
Councilmember Ross.
Call the question?
All right, question's been called. All those in favor of calling the question?
Second.
Aye.
Aye. Oh, sorry. Thank you, Jim. I'll say it again. I have a motion and a second to call the question. Thank you for catching that faux pas. All those in favor of calling the question?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nope.
Okay. Supermajority has it, so the question's been called. We now go to immediate vote. All those in favor of approving the warrants?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Okay. All right. With that, any other report for Community Development Committee?
Nope, F&A, still got one agenda, Bill.
I'm sorry, I was an F&A. Yeah, thank you, Councilman. I'm batting 1,000 tonight. Finance Administration Agenda Bill 19017, Resolution 1479, ratifying the proclamation of emergency for the February 19th, 2019 winter storm.
I believe we've probably read this in probably twice, so I'll move right to recommendation. Move to adopt Resolution 1479, ratifying the proclamation of an emergency for the February 2019 winter storm.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve Agenda Bill 19017 as stated by Councilmember Holloway. Would the chair of the committee like to comment on this prior to kicking it up to the public?
Well, other than that, I believe you all experienced the storm we had in February, either remotely or personally. This action is really to ratify the mayor's decision to call an emergency at that stage. We are at the stage now where we can quantify the cost, but that will be a separate action. At this stage tonight is just to ratify his declaration on February of the emergency in regards to that winter storm.
All right. Is there any member of the public that would like to comment on this item prior to action? Seeing no one move forward, any further discussion? Councilmember Jeans.
So I don't have any problem approving the resolution, and you're talking about we'll get some information on the cost. When might that be?
It'll be relatively quickly. At one stage, it was actually in here, but we thought it was inappropriate. This action is merely to ratify the declaration of emergency. They've got the figures. We'll bring those forward shortly.
Councilmember Sunwell.
I too have no problem with this, but I thought the reason we hadn't done this already is because we were waiting for that financial information. So I'm not understanding what's changed.
The discussion was to split out the two actions. One is the confirming or ratifying the mayor's declaration. The second one is the actual costs associated.
But my point is we weren't comfortable ratifying a proclamation of emergency until we saw those numbers. I'm just wondering what has changed in the last 6 weeks.
It's independent.
Councilmember Lassay and then Councilmember Mayhew.
I'm just going to reiterate the same comment and of question is that we pulled this from the agenda, from a previous agenda, because there was no information on the costs that went along with ratifying the proclamation. I believe even the Snoqualmie Municipal Code or the RCW, one of the two, I don't have the actual two in front of us, indicated that was a part of the declaration of emergency. There was some information there. I am not comfortable with approving this until we've seen that information.
Councilmember Mayhew.
So I was probably the source of some of this confusion. Our municipal code, section 2.48, requires the council to ratify potentially two things. One is a declaration of emergency, and secondly is any, and I'm paraphrasing here, I'm not reading it, but any actions taken by the mayor under that proclamation, such as issuing emergency orders and things of that nature. So I wanted to know, before voting to approve this, whether any such proclamations had been made, and I don't know if proclamation is the correct word, but any such emergency orders had been made, and if so, what they were. The mayor confirmed at our F&A committee that he did not issue any.
No quarantines or anything else?
And no quarantines or anything, and that was the concern that I had wanted answered. There's nothing in our code, section 2.48, or for that matter in RCW 3533-081, that addresses the budget consequences. That's something that just goes through our normal budgeting type rules. And so, you know, we'll have to deal with whatever those expenditures are, whatever the budget impacts are. So I think that's a separate matter. It doesn't have anything to do with 248, our code 248, or the RCW that's mentioned here. So, so it wasn't in. So the thing I was wanting was not the financial information, but the information as to whether the mayor had made any such declarations, and if so, what they were. And he's confirmed that there were none.
Councilmember Shepherd.
Well, I was trying to go to other cities to see how they normally handle this kind of thing, and I wasn't clear, looking at, say, the city of Issaquah, whether they actually have the council actually ratify a declaration of emergency. I think it's actually under the purview of the mayor just to do that, and that's about all there is. But I don't know if I just didn't find it or whatever. The other thing is the financial consequence of an emergency. This emergency may take us a while to understand what all the costs are. As I understand, we know majority of the costs, but as far as some of the signs that have, you know, fallen over because of the snow plowing and so forth, I don't know if Dan can talk to, are there?
Curb and sidewalk damage.
Yeah.
Issaquah Municipal Code is
I'm sorry.
not germane. This agenda bill
Councilmember
is
Holloway,
in
I'm going to have to
compliance
ask
with
that you,
RCW.
if you're not doing a point of order, I'm going to ask that you wait to be recognized. Councilmember Mayhew had his hand up before you.
Go ahead.
Mayor, I wonder, I realized that I was just relaying to my fellow council members a comment that you had made at a committee meeting. I wonder if you'd be willing to just let the whole council hear directly from you that you didn't make any of these emergency orders under the proclamation.
Yeah, no proclamation of martial law or quarantines or curfews or anything. It was strictly to keep the resources flowing as a typical declaration of emergency would do to expend monies and resources and staff to tend to the needs of the community expeditiously. So nothing beyond that. Councilmember Holloway?
Other than to note, I believe a point of order does take some precedence, but I already made it. I'm done.
Councilmember Lissay.
I think this might be a question for the city attorney. Can you point me where in Municipal Code Chapter 2.48 that requires the city council to ratify the declaration of emergency?
Sure. It's in 2.48050 sub A sub 2. I'm not hooked up here. I don't know if staff can pull that up, but
Thank you, Council.
248050A says, in the event of an emergency or disaster, as herein defined, the mayor is hereby empowered as follows. Number 2 says, issue and transmit to federal, state, regional, and local agencies a proclamation of local emergency.
You can just read the last sentence if you
And then the
like.
last sentence, and it goes on to describe what the proclamation can include. Last sentence states, following its issuance, such a proclamation must be approved by the city council when practical. So that's in the municipal code.
Nothing clear about what happens if it's not approved.
Right.
Constitutional crisis.
Councilmember Mayhew.
And just to clarify, that was under section 2 of that subsection. It's section 1, which also has a requirement for a city council approval if any of the items listed in number 1 had happened. And as you heard the mayor just now say, none of those happened. That was the thing I was waiting to hear.
Okay, if there's no further discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. That was the toughest ratification of emergency proclamation ever. Had several over the years. All right, so any other report for Finance Administration Committee?
No further report for F&A.
Right, Public Safety Committee report.
No report.
Committee of the Whole, Councilmember Jeans, I'll turn to you on the Town Hall recap.
I'm talking about the town hall, but I've got to ask us to back up a bit. And you remember at the retreat, we created a public engagement ad hoc committee that Peggy and Sean and I were the appointed members of that committee. The public engagement contemplates more than just town halls, but because of the urgency of wanting to do town halls, 4 of them, 1 per quarter, we had to hustle to get one done in the month of March to get it in the first quarter. So we met the deadline. We had what I would regard as an overwhelming success town hall meeting away from City Hall on a Saturday in the evening. Kids were invited. There are a lot of sort of things that we tried anew. And I would say that depending upon who you count as attendees, there were 60 to 70 people took a Saturday night, including all of you council members, all of us were there, including 2 staff members. And actually there was a band of firemen there who just showed up and had to take off and put out a fire, I think, during the course of the meeting.
Not a fire at the meeting, you mean?
No.
But I would say it was a very successful thing, and the committee wants to continue on and do 4 or 3 remaining quarterly town hall meetings. But you, as the council, we as the council, ought to consider whether the ad hoc committee will continue and whether we will embrace other topics of matters of public engagement aside from town hall, and how you want us to proceed with those. So I'm not suggesting we discuss this at length now, but we should consider it during meetings to come. Okay?
Councilmember Sunwell.
So that was a great recap. The thing I was most excited about was seeing, I would say 90% of the people that I had never seen in a city-related meeting before. I thought that was my personal goal, is to be hearing from people that we don't normally hear from, and I thought it was fantastic, and the feedback was overwhelmingly positive. In that vein, I do believe we have, for lack of a better word, an obligation to continue that process. One of the things I had expressed, and by the way, I hope the city has sent a note or something to Mr. Fong, who I thought did a fantastic job. So something maybe on behalf of the city to thank him for his services and his sense of humor, which kept things light at times. But one of the things I had discussed at a very final meeting, because keep in mind, we'd never really done this, we sort of did one in December, but there was it was a very fluid thing, and I think some of us were a little nervous how it was going to go, and I think it turned out fine. But there are lots of different formats that town halls can take, and the one we elected to take this first time around was a Q&A. Arguably the easiest format to just do, although sometimes the scariest, just because we don't have all the answers. But another format that I think we should take a very serious look at is getting specific information from our citizens on very specific topics that are currently under review or that we see in the near future being topics of important conversation. Sometimes we live in a bubble here in City Council. We get the same 7 that show up for City Council. We get the same 8 to 10 sometimes that show up for for public comment, and we're insulated, I think, largely from the broader group of citizenry. So one of the things, we had a meeting sort of not happen on Friday, unfortunately, where we're going to start to plan the next one, but I took the liberty of reaching out to a couple different council members, not part of that group, to get an idea of what maybe the next format should look like. And we this date is rough, but I think it's representative of the time frame, mid-May, where at least a handful of us would like to see something discussed around the expansion of the community center. That's an extremely, it came up at our meeting. It came up at in some of the comments talking about the hawk signal. It came up in a lot of different things, and I think that's a topic that I know as one of the 7 council members, as we look to decide on what to do about that and prioritize that in our capital project, what the public thinks on that. And because I know what I think, and I know what some of the other 7 here think, but I think we desperately need, and credit to SciView, they have already started to do this for their project. And I feel like we need the same thing. And so that was what I was going to propose. I don't know that action needs to be taken today, but there was also some fear about making everything ridge-centric. So my thought, and this was a great thought by Bob that we talked about Friday afternoon, is that have these first 2 up at on the ridge, and then topic to be decided later, a town hall meeting, what I'll call number 3 post Labor Day, once everybody's back in school. And then town hall meeting number 4 sometime between Thanksgiving and Christmas before it gets crazy. And I would love to see that. So the third one maybe at Snoqualmie Elementary. And then I think the 4th one would be awesome to have at the new Mount Si High School in one of the million new rooms that they will have there. And so that was just I want to put out a roadmap so that people understood that we want to have a good cross-section of where we have it, a good cross-section of topics, and to continue this momentum around energizing and activating our citizenry in key important issues. Sorry that was so long-winded.
Peggy?
All right. Thank you both for the update. Councilmember Ross?
That town hall idea sounds great. I'm all for it, for talking about the community center. Also, I've been in discussion with a couple council members. So you've talked about it was well-attended town hall on a Saturday night, but I think there's still a group of residents that we're not reaching that perhaps can't meet at night. And so I'm proposing a coffee with the council, and I've on Tuesday, April 16th, starting at 9 a.m., and it'd be at the YMCA, and it would just be people can come in after they drop their kids off at school and just have a discussion with your council member.
Councilmember Mayhew?
I think that sounds like a fantastic idea. So if I'm understanding it, just more of a discussion with council members.
Right.
So coffee with a cop, coffee with council member, that sort of thing. More just a discussion. I found that there was a lot of interest after the town hall meeting on people that just wanted to talk further about, in some cases, topics we'd already talked about in the town hall meeting, in some cases other things, more of just a chat kind of thing. So I think that's a fantastic idea. I think there's a desire for that.
Good.
And I don't think we all have to be there. I think, some of these things, it's hard to get all 7 of us there, especially at that sort of a time, but, maybe, it's less than all of us, and we do different ones of us at different times and do this a number of times. I think that's fantastic.
Councilmember Say.
I'd sent an email in response to one of the council members' request about kind of throwing the idea of certain dates in the quarterly, and I'm all for doing town halls. I just want to make sure we're checking the local community calendars and we're comparing the nights and the evenings that we're looking at. One of the challenges, I think, as I'm in a family, 2 working parents and kids in school and nighttime activities during the school year, our evenings are not very open. I think that's probably the case for the vast majority of folks that live in the city of Snoqualmie. Trying to find some date around our local community calendars and school calendars might be quite difficult to do that on a weeknight. I was pretty impressed with the number of folks we had attend on a Saturday evening. Would encourage us to maybe not do it as late as 7 o'clock like we did and do it a little earlier, but I think the weekend may afford us the best opportunity to get participants, just because folks have things going on during the weekdays.
I was impressed that many people gave up their Saturday night to come. I was very skeptical, I have to admit, beforehand, but.
It was a very nice day weather-wise, too.
And that, too. I thought the weather and the Saturday night was going to kill you, but I was impressed that 52 people showed up. Councilor Mayhew.
Yeah, so I don't know if we need a motion, but I would encourage the task force or whatever we're.
Ad hoc
committee to proceed, schedule those dates, I think. I mean, I try and factor in the comments that you've heard tonight, but I would request you just keep going, schedule it. I think the coffee with the councilman is fantastic. I'll be able to make that date. You know, if it's just a couple of us, that's fine. Let's proceed with all of this. Do you need anything formal from us, or?
I don't think so.
I think you should proceed. I don't know if anyone else disagrees, but I think you should proceed.
Yeah, I'm willing to try again. I'm not willing to have meetings recorded, but so if that continues to be a hurdle, we may need to readdress who's on the committee. But I'm willing to try again.
Okay. With that,
Mayor?
any other?
I'd like to, I don't know if I need to make a motion to amend the agenda, but I'd like to add one other item to discuss under the committee of the whole. I just want to pick up a comment on a comment that was made by a citizen earlier in the citizen comment period.
You think you have to introduce it, get a second, and we'll vote on it?
So I'd like to make a motion to add to committee of the whole discussion of comments about funding for alternative types of funding for things like, well, specifically for the I-9018 interchange.
Second.
Okay, motion and a second as stated by Councilmember Mayhew. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Your topic is on.
I'm abstaining.
You can't
Let him know.
Yes, I can on this.
read your city code.
This is not an agenda bill.
Not
or
an agenda
ordinance.
bill.
Doesn't matter, it passed.
Doesn't matter.
You still got 5 that want it on, so proceed.
Yeah, so I think, not to put people on the spot tonight, because I'm guessing we don't have a well-thought-out answer, but I think that the notion of doing a fundraiser or considering that as an alternative form, or whatever alternative forms of raising money for something like that would be, I think would be worth a response. So I wonder if, maybe Mary would be willing to take on coming up with, I don't know what the best form of response would be to help. I imagine there's some legal issues involved. I imagine there's some practical issues involved, but maybe.
I'd be comfortable with the council setting up a GoFundMe site under the council's name.
So I don't know what all the ins and outs of that are, but maybe there could be some follow-up, and maybe be willing to take on figuring out what the right way to communicate back, whether it's to one of our committees, and maybe involve that citizen in understanding the response. I think that'd be fantastic. I don't know if you all have a different view. And Mayor, I don't know if I'm giving you something you're not willing to do.
I'll discuss it. I mean, I'll see if there's any legal issues or hurdles. I can't imagine there's some sort of gift of public funds. Gift of private funds, I think, is perfectly acceptable. We'll take anybody's money. But we'll discuss it at staff tomorrow, and I'll get back to William. Yeah, I'm skeptical, but most people aren't real excited about funding government stuff. They feel like, hey, I'm paying taxes when I'm doing it, but hey, nothing ventured, nothing gained.
Well, yeah, I think if we could maybe explore what the rules are around that, what the issues are around that, just so that, let's respond to that suggestion sort of thoughtfully and lay out what the pros and cons are, and what we can or can't do. And
all right.
I thought it was worth a little follow-up.
Okay.
Well, but I guess my only concern, funding of the interchange is not a direct responsibility of the city. We are the Yankees using it. The Confederates ought to chip in too. So maybe this is a broader discussion of both north and south of that interchange, how we could do something.
Are you calling Washtenaw Confederates, or are you calling, careful who because they're already chipping in money, and Maple Valley's
They're
going to be
already
voting.
chipping in, well, case in point, yes, they're already chipping in for the temporary lane.
Yeah.
Shouldn't look to Snoqualmie to chip in to fund the grander project. Should look for the same base to fund that grander project, and
I'll
I'm not
go
sure
over
how we do
I'll
that.
go over the numbers in my analysis with you. Yeah.
Yeah, so Mayor, I think there's some information on our website about what's going on with that project, but there's been some recent developments that have been very positive about other communities funding, other, the tribes funding some funding, and just what's going on with that. It might be nice maybe to update that web page so that people would know kind of where everything stands. You've been doing a lot of work on this, and
A lot of moving pieces between culverts and new locations and costs and stuff, so I'm trying to find a point where it seems like it stands still for a moment to take a snapshot, so, yeah.
The other thing.
I mean, I appreciate Councilmember Holloway's comments, but as you recall, the council never did give any direction to go look down south. I mean, I took the initiative to do that, and given my relations with those communities, but I did do an extensive, per their request, traffic analysis using the U.S. Census data from on the map, and kind of showed what those impacts were from the respective communities. Yeah.
And I think the temporary on-ramp is a targeted thing. The overall project, though, should not be considered Snoqualmie's sole responsibility.
And I was successful in making that case. There's a sweet spot between asking too much and getting nothing.
Yeah.
And asking an amount that I think I'd be successful getting. And so I think we got there, and I'm hopeful in the next few days when Maple Valley has their council meeting, that last piece is going to fall into place. So another $175,000 would make it very much easier for us to be able to do it in a 2-year temporary card tab fee increase, for example, and not have a leftover balance. Councilmember Mayhew.
Yeah, so just my point there is I think with everything moving so quickly and with all the work that's been done, a lot of people aren't necessarily putting those pieces together. And
right.
So I think helping them kind of see that, I think people will be very pleased to realize the work that's gone in. I know I'm extraordinarily impressed. So the other thing I thought might be worth...
In the piece I forgot to mention, we're pushing it from both ends, trying to drive the cost down while getting more contributions. And so I think already we've got that project down by a couple
You
hundred
tell that
thousand.
story a little more. I think people would like to hear it.
We're just, again, I'm trying to wait for the story to settle a little bit. I don't want to have to tell it 5 more times in the next month. So, yeah, it could be to where, between the cost savings and that, it's a net $275,000 reduction. So, anyway, sorry to interrupt.
No, I was just going to say, the other aspect of what was said there was mentioning the notion of a park being put up in that area. And the key point there is all of that area is actually outside of the city, not something that we have any ability to do anything but it's really important when you talk about this to have a white
It's a hazardous job for someone.
Jimmy.
Just check and make sure everybody's awake.
But correct me if I'm wrong, Mayor, taking the notion of a park on, so that's all county land, if I'm correct, and a request like that would need to go to this, would appropriately go to the King County Council, is that correct?
Well, probably the state.
It's actually.
Well, that's what I'm asking, who?
Maybe.
Statewide.
Is that WashDOT land, state land?
Yeah, or federal jurisdiction, state right away.
So then going to our state legislators would be the path?
Right, correct. All right, any further discussion on this item? Thanks, William. All right, sorry, back to the regular agenda. I don't think there's any other items here. Yeah, staff reports are written at the beginning of the month. However, at this time, are there any questions for or from the staff? Councilmember Lassay and then Councilmember Shepherd.
I'd like to know which staff report has the smarted council goals and objectives included in it.
Be out this week. We've got them ready to go. I apologize for not getting them out last week. We had a little bit of glitch with formatting, but it'll be done
So they'll be distributed
this week.
via email this week?
Yes.
By the end of the week?
Important.
Thanks for keeping us on task, Councilmember Lassay. Councilmember Shepherd.
So I was looking at Parks and Public Works, and I don't know if there's anyone here who can speak to it. On the pedestrian activated signal, Fisher Avenue and Snoqualmie Parkway, it looks like the contract amount was $366,000 and the budget was for $325,000, and there's a difference of $41,000.
Oh, I'm sorry, is this a, continue, sorry.
Yeah, and I just wondered where that money would be coming from. And then under the pressure zone modification project, that project is coming in at $400,000 under budget, and I wanted to know.
Point of order. Have these been added to the agenda in the appropriate
Well,
manner?
that's what I was going to maybe raise, but I assume it's in the context of she's asking a clarifying question of staff, but then Dan's no longer here. I'm not sure why he'd leave, but.
I would really not want to necessarily try to address those in
Yeah,
such an informal
they're more
fashion.
than simple questions. It's those more like topics that need more extensive conversation. They weren't approved by the rest of the council to add to the agenda tonight, so I'd ask that you either make a motion to add them or we could take them up at a committee.
I'd move that we can address these questions.
Mayor, if the council would
Hang on, Bob, I got a motion. All right, sorry, that dies for lack of a second. So Councilmember Shepherd, if I could ask, I have a motion, a second to add those items to the agenda. And you just, I'm not going to ask for discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Nay.
I count 5 nays. All right, so Councilmember Shepherd, if I could ask, could you just submit those to Jody by email or to the committee chair, which would in this case would be Parks and Public Works for me, and they'll perhaps add that or take that up on the agenda in the committee meeting.
Okay.
Okay?
Thanks.
All right. Any other questions from the staff tonight on the staff reports, pertaining to the staff reports? Robert, go ahead.
I'm going to think about something else.
Go. Well, that's what I'm saying, is from the staff, so if the staff has something to add.
I just wanted to make a comment. Our staff is tracking, we had a question by a couple of people internally regarding what's still alive in the state budget, and I just wanted to give an update to the council members. Right now, the
Point
state...
of order, Mr. Mayor, is this an item that's in one of the staff reports?
No.
Then I think it's been added to the agenda.
Riverwalk, yes.
Mayor, could I ask that we could just have staff to send out this in electronic email? We seem to be prolonging the council meeting. There's no reason for doing this.
Exactly.
We'd be happy to take these up, but these are not regular agenda items. With all due respect, these questions should be asked before the meeting. We can be happy to answer them. But in this context, I can't expect staff to be going through these things in this fashion.
That's correct.
All right. So there's any further announcements before we conclude tonight? Again, volunteer recognition dinner Wednesday night. Hope you all as many council members can attend as possible. Any other announcements? Community events, anything else going? Councilmember Mayhew?
Maybe sometime in the not too distant future, staff or administration could just let us know with regard to staff reports, maybe what would be a good mechanism that we should follow where we have questions about those, where we want to send in follow-up questions, because I think there's a little confusion here as to exactly, kind of what would be the best way. So maybe just give us some guidance, hey, and maybe it's as simple as send questions to the department director, but if you could just let us know, then that might kind of relieve some of the discomfort here or confusion about how we would ask those questions.
We'll discuss that tomorrow morning at the executive staff meeting too. That's why I hesitated when I was originally going to question whether it was relevant or not to the staff report. I hadn't seen, or I read through the staff reports, but I don't recall that specific items that Councilmember Shepherd. I think it's great to have an opportunity for the council to ask clarifications on if they go through the staff reports and they have questions about it or want clarifications, or the staff wants to add a little more detail. But there's a fine line between where it suddenly becomes a whole half-hour discussion on some complex project or something. And, it's just meant for kind of brief clarifications or so that's, I'm not sure if there's going to be a clear line there somewhere, but we'll discuss it at staff tomorrow and see.
If you give us some guidance, I think that'd be just help us know how to play.
Okay.
My purpose was simply because the person that would give the answer was not here tonight.
Well,
so
that's
there's
a
no
good
reason
point.
to belabor the point.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why he left.
Yeah.
Maybe the Cubs game was on. I don't know.
Basketball is.
Okay, so no further announcements or issues. I'll entertain it. Will there be no further business coming for the council? Entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adjourn to meeting tonight. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. Congratulations, you finished before 9.